Hollywood legends clash in an epic fight. De Niro versus Stallone, a quarrel that shocked millions. But what happened behind the scenes? Find out the secret that changed everything. To the end. Before we get to the video, let us know where you are watching this video and whether you liked it. And now let's dive in. The massive studio of a television network in the heart of New York City smelled of freshly brewed coffee and floor polish. High ceilings, illuminated by blazing spotlights, created an atmosphere of grandeur, but also tension. Backstage, fans hummed, and technicians in headsets frantically checked microphones and cameras. Tonight was a special evening, a live broadcast of the popular talk show Voice of the Nation, featuring two Hollywood legends, Robert De Niro and Sylvester Stallone. The theme of the night was the legacy of cinema. How old stars shaped the new generation. For the audience, mostly those over 55 who had grown up on these actors' films, it was like a trip down memory lane. The show's host, Edward Crowe, a man with graying temples and a charismatic smile, sat at his desk, reviewing his notes. His career rested on his ability to balance light humor with serious topics, but tonight he felt a slight unease. De Niro and Stallone weren't just stars, they were cultural icons. Their personalities, like their roles, were explosive, and Edward knew he had to keep things under control. The audience in the studio, mostly older folks, buzzed with anticipation. A woman in a blue dress whispered to her friend, "Remember watching Rocky in the theater? I cried back then." A man in a checkered shirt nearby added, "And Taxi Driver?" De Niro was just chilling. When the spotlights flared and the show's theme music played, Edward stood, smiling broadly. "Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Voice of a Nation. Tonight, we have guests who need no introduction. Please welcome Robert De Niro and Sylvester Stallone." The room erupted in applause. De Niro entered first, dressed in a dark suit, with his signature, restrained smile. His sharp, observant eyes scanned the audience, as if sizing up every person. Stallone followed, wearing a gray shirt with the top button undone, sporting a wide, almost boyish grin. He waved to the crowd, eliciting even louder cheers. Edward gestured for them to sit. "Gentlemen, it's an honor to have you here. You're both legends who've shaped not just Hollywood, but entire generations. Let's start with something simple. What does it mean to be an actor in 2025, when cinema has changed so much?" De Niro leaned toward the microphone, speaking in his low, measured voice. "You know, Edward, acting is about truth. Doesn't matter if it's 1975 or 2025. You have to find something real in a character, something that resonates with people. Today, there's a lot of technology, special effects, but if you don't believe in what you're playing, no one else will." The audience murmured approvingly. Edward nodded and turned to Stallone. "Sylvester, what's your take? You created Rocky, an icon that still inspires. How do you see your role in modern cinema?" Stallone leaned back in his chair, smiling. "For me, it's about stories that hit you hard. Rocky isn't just about boxing, it's about fighting, about getting up when life knocks you down. Today's young actors, directors, they want everything fast, lots of CGI. But I say, go back to basics. Tell a story that makes people cry or laugh." Edward smiled, sensing the show was off to a smooth start. "Well said. Now, let's talk about your relationship. You both worked in an era when Hollywood was, let's say, competitive. Were there moments when you competed for roles, or maybe for the audience's attention?" De Niro shrugged, but his eyes glinted. "Competition? It was always there. But I never thought of it as a race. You do your work, and if you're good, people notice." Stallone laughed, but there was an edge to it. "Oh, Bobby, don't be so modest. Remember when we both auditioned for that role in The Breakfast Club? You got it, but I didn't hold a grudge. For long." The audience chuckled, assuming it was a joke. Edward jumped in. "Wow, sounds like a story. Tell us, Sylvester, what happened?" Stallone waved a hand, but his smile grew less genuine. "No big deal. Just that Bobby always had this. Knack for convincing directors, he was the only one for the part. I relied more on my charm. De Niro turned his head, his gaze icy. What do you mean, Sylvester? Convincing directors? Or maybe I just came prepared. The atmosphere in the studio shifted. The audience quieted, sensing the tension. Edward tried to defuse it. All right, gentlemen, let's not get heated. You've both achieved incredible success. Maybe share a story about collaboration, not competition. But Stallone, seemingly oblivious, leaned forward, his voice sharper. Collaboration? You know, Bobby, I always thought you, how do I put it, underestimated others. Remember what you said about Rocky in that 80s interview? Called it just a sports movie. For me, that wasn't just a movie, it was my life. De Niro es lebenstijd. His fingers tapped nervously on the desk. I never said that, Sylvester. And you know it. Don't make things up. Oh, I'm not making it up, Stallone snapped. I read that interview. You even added that your roles were deeper because you played complex characters. What? My roles are just punching bags. The audience gasped. Edward raised a hand, trying to intervene. Gentlemen, let's take a step back. We're here to talk about your art, not. But De Niro cut him off, his voice low but piercing. If you want to dig up old grudges, Sylvester, go ahead. But don't accuse me of things I didn't do. I respected your work, always. But it seems you can't accept that we're different. And I don't have to praise every one of your films. Stallone stood abruptly, his face flushed. Respected? You call that respect? You always acted like you were above the rest of us, Bobby. And I'm not the only one who thinks so. Technicians backstage exchanged glances. One whispered into a walkie-talkie. This is bad. Call the producer. Edward, realizing the show was spiraling, tried again. Okay, let's switch gears. You both inspire people. Maybe tell us how you handle the pressure of fame. But Stallone, ignoring him, pointed at De Niro. I'll tell you how I handle it. I don't hide behind my method acting like some people. I go out to the people, I'm honest with them. You? You can't even be real right now. De Niro rose slowly. His eyes burned, but his voice remained calm. Sylvester, if you want to settle this, let's do it off camera. But if you want to show, I'm not playing your game. The room froze. The audience, expecting nostalgia, now witnessed something else, a raw, painful confrontation between two icons. The woman in the blue dress grabbed her friend's hand. God, this is serious, she whispered. Edward, sensing the crisis, announced. We'll be right back after a short break. The cameras cut off, but the tension lingered. De Niro stood, staring into the distance, his fists clenched. Stallone, breathing heavily, walked to the edge of the stage, where his assistant waited. Backstage, the producer, a young woman named Laura, rushed toward them, panic on her face. What was that? She hissed. We're live, gentlemen. You can't do this. De Niro turned to her, his voice cold. I didn't start it, Laura, but I'll finish it. Stallone, hearing this, spun around. Finish it? Oh, we're not done, Bobby. Edward, standing between them, felt sweat trickle down his back. He knew this break was his only chance to save the show. But deep down he realized what had just happened wasn't just a flare-up. It was something deeper, something that had been simmering for years. And now it had erupted in front of millions of viewers. Backstage, Megan, the young assistant in charge of the guests, watched the scene, clutching her tablet. She'd heard rumors of an old feud between De Niro and Stallone, but no one expected it to explode like this. She turned to Laura, whispering, What do we do? If they keep going, it'll be a disaster. Laura, lips pursed, replied, Either a disaster or the best ratings in the show's history. But we have to calm them down. In the audience, people whispered among themselves. The man in the checkered shirt leaned toward his neighbor. This isn't scripted, is it? They're really fighting. His neighbor, an elderly woman with curly hair, nodded. I saw De Niro's eyes. That's not acting. It's personal. The broadcast was set to resume in 3 minutes. And no one, not the producers, not the host, not the actors themselves, knew what would happen next. The 3-minute break felt like an eternity. The studio was cloaked in tense silence, broken only by the technicians' whispers and the hurried footsteps of producer Laura, who was trying to salvage the situation. The air was heavy with the smell of hot spotlights and nervous sweat. Backstage, Robert De Niro stood by a wall, arms crossed, his gaze cold and impenetrable. Sylvester Stallone, on the other hand, paced like a boxer before a round, muttering under his breath. His assistant, a young man in a black t-shirt, tried to calm him, but Stallone waved him off. Laura, tablet in hand, rushed to Edward Crowe, who was nervously sipping water from a plastic bottle. "Edward, we need to separate them," she whispered. "If they clash again, it'll ruin the show. Or," she paused, "it'll skyrocket our ratings. But I'm not sure we're ready for that risk." Edward wiped sweat from his brow. "Laura, this isn't just a show anymore. I don't know what it is. But we can't just kick them out of the studio. The audience won't forgive us. And I'm not sure they'd leave." Meanwhile, Megan, the assistant, approached De Niro, holding a glass of water. "Mr. De Niro, maybe you need to calm down." Her voice trembled. She was the youngest on the team and never imagined she'd be caught in such drama. De Niro glanced at her, his eyes softening slightly. "Thanks, kid. But I'm calm. It's him," he nodded towards Stallone, "who can't keep it together." Megan nodded, unsure what to say. She sensed that De Niro wasn't just angry. There was something deeper in his voice, perhaps pain or disappointment. She stepped back as Laura called her to help prepare for the broadcast. In the audience, the crowd buzzed like a beehive. Marge, the woman in the blue dress, turned to her friend Ellen. "I'm telling you, Ellen, this isn't just a spat. They're hiding something. I read in the 90s they didn't get along over some project. Maybe that's it." Ellen, clutching her purse, shook her head. "Marge, you're always looking for conspiracies. But I agree, it looks serious. Poor Edward, he's probably panicking." The man in the checkered shirt, Fred, chimed in. "I'm betting on De Niro. He looks like he could take Stallone down with one stare. But Sly, he won't back off. That's Rocky." A technician in a headset shouted, "30 seconds to air." Laura mustered her courage and approached the actors. "Gentlemen, I'm begging you, let's stick to the topic. People want to hear about your films, your lives, not this. We can make this broadcast legendary, but only if you cooperate." Stallone stopped pacing, his face still red. "I'll cooperate if he pointed at De Niro, stops acting like he's the king of Hollywood." De Niro slowly turned his head. "Sylvester, I never claimed the throne. But if you want to fight, I'm ready. Just no cheap theatrics." Laura raised her hands. "Enough. You're both going back on stage. Edward will lead, and you'll answer his questions. If either of you starts again, we'll cut the mics." "Understood." Stallone grunted but nodded. De Niro silently walked to his chair. Laura exhaled, but her heart pounded. She knew this was only a temporary truce. The spotlights flared again, the theme music played, and Edward, summoning all his charisma, smiled at the camera. "We're back on Voice of the Nation. Thank you for staying with us. We've had a heated discussion, but we're ready to continue. Gentlemen," he turned to De Niro and Stallone, "let's talk about what unites you. You've both created films that touched hearts. Is there a shared story that shows your mutual respect?" The question was a trap, and Edward knew it. He hoped it would force them to recall something positive. But Stallone, still simmering, answered first. "Respect? You know, Edward, respect is when you acknowledge someone's work. I invited Bobby to a party after the Rambo premiere in '82. He didn't show, didn't even call. That's your respect." The audience gasped. De Niro rolled his eyes, but his voice remained steady. "Sylvester, I didn't show because I was shooting in London. I wrote to you, but I guess you were too busy celebrating to check your mail." Stallone laughed, but it was bitter. Always an excuse, Bobby. You were never a team player. Always on your own, with your method. And the rest of us? Just background for your genius, right? Edward felt the situation escalating again. He tried to pivot. Okay, let's talk about modern Hollywood. How do you see the impact of streaming platforms like Netflix on? But De Niro interrupted, his voice sharper. No, Edward, let's finish this. Sylvester, if you have a problem with me, say it straight. No hints, no old stories. What do you want to hear? That I admit Rocky is a masterpiece? Fine, it's a masterpiece. But that doesn't mean I have to bow to you. Stallone stood, his fists clenched. You think I need your compliments? I need respect, Bobby. You always look down on me, and I'm tired of it. The audience erupted in whispers and gasps. Marge grabbed Ellen's hand. God, they're going to fight, she whispered. Edward leapt from his chair. Gentlemen, please sit down. We're here to talk, not. But De Niro, instead of escalating, suddenly fell silent. He sat slowly, his gaze fixed downward. The studio went quiet. Even Stallone, who looked ready to charge, paused, confused by the shift. Sylvester, De Niro said softly, I don't want this. I don't want us looking like two old fools bickering in front of the country. If I hurt you, I didn't mean to. But you need to understand, I'm not your enemy. Stallone stood, breathing heavily. His eyes glistened, but he didn't know what to say. The audience held its breath. Edward, sensing the moment, added gently, Robert, Sylvester, you're both icons. You inspire millions. Maybe this is a chance to show that even legends can find common ground. Stallone sat slowly, his shoulders slumping. He rubbed his face, as if gathering his thoughts. You know, Bobby, he said finally, maybe I went too far. But I always felt you underestimated me. And that hurts, you know? Because I respect you. Always have. De Niro nodded, his face serious. I understand. And I respect you, Sylvester. Your films. They gave people hope. I didn't always say it, but it's true. The audience burst into applause. Marge wiped a tear, whispering to Ellen, I can't believe this happened. It's so real. Edward, sensing the crisis had passed, smiled. That's what I call a real conversation. Thank you for your honesty, gentlemen. Let's move to a lighter topic. What advice would you give young actors just starting out? The show continued, but the atmosphere had changed. The audience, who came for nostalgia, got something more, a moment of raw, human vulnerability from two legends. Backstage, Laura exhaled, whispering to Megan, We survived, and this might be the most watched episode of the year. But Megan, watching De Niro and Stallone now answering questions more calmly, thought it wasn't over. Something in their eyes suggested this conversation wasn't finished. And maybe off-camera, they'd finally talk for real. The Voice of the Nation broadcast ended to thunderous applause. The spotlights dimmed, leaving the studio in half-darkness, and the audience, still buzzing, slowly filed out. Conversations hummed in the air. Older couples shared their reactions, recalling scenes from Taxi Driver or Rocky, while others muttered that they hadn't seen a live broadcast this intense since the scandalous talk shows of the 90s. Outside the studio, New York sparkled with lights, while inside, the air still carried the faint scent of hot metal from the spotlights and a hint of spilled coffee backstage. Robert De Niro and Sylvester Stallone stayed in the studio after the cameras shut off. Edward Crowe, exhausted but relieved, shook their hands, muttering something about a legendary night. Producer Laura, her nerves frayed, was already rushing to the editing room to review the footage and prepare clips for social media. She knew this episode would dominate platforms from X to evening news. Megan, the young assistant, stood off to the side, clutching her tablet. Her eyes darted between the two actors, who now sat at the table on stage a few feet apart. Stallone held a glass of water, his fingers nervously tapping the glass. De Niro, as always, looked calm, but his gaze was fixed on some distant point, as if deep in thought. "Gentlemen, do you need transportation?" Megan asked timidly, stepping closer. Her voice quivered slightly. She was still reeling from how the broadcast had teetered on the edge of disaster. Stallone glanced at her, his expression softening. "Thanks, kid, but I'll stick around." "Need to breathe." De Niro nodded, not looking at her. "Me too. Norus, Megan." She stepped back, sensing something brewing between them. The technicians were already packing up equipment, and the studio slowly emptied. Only a few people lingered backstage, whispering among themselves. Megan moved to the water cooler, but kept her ears open. Stallone broke the silence first. "You know, Bobby," his voice was hoarse but calm, "I didn't want all this. Not like this, not in front of the whole country." De Niro turned his head, his eyes narrowing. "Then why'd you start it? You knew it'd blow up." Stallone sighed, set the glass down, and rubbed his temples. "Because I'm tired. Tired of feeling like I'm less than you. All these years, all those articles calling you a genius, and me the boxing movie guy. And I know you didn't write them, but you never contradicted them." De Niro stayed silent, his fingers tightening slightly on the edge of the table. He looked like he was wrestling with whether to speak. Finally he did, his voice low but piercing. "Sylvester, I never thought of you as less. You created Rocky. It's not just a movie, it's, I don't know, an anthem for people. I couldn't have done that. My roles, they're about darkness, pain. Yours are about hope, and I envy that if I'm honest." Stallone's eyebrows shot up. "You? Envied me? Bobby, you're kidding." De Niro gave a faint smile, but his eyes were sincere. "Not kidding. I saw how people reacted to your films. They left the theater ready to move mountains. My films. They make people think, but they don't always give hope. I respect what you do. Always have." Stallone leaned back, his face bewildered. He clearly hadn't expected this. Megan, standing by the cooler, held her breath, afraid to move. She felt she was witnessing something rare, a moment when two giants dropped their masks. "Then why didn't you ever say it?" Stallone asked, his voice almost a whisper. "All these years, all those premieres, parties. You always kept your distance. I thought you saw yourself as above me." De Niro shook his head. "It's not about you, Sylvester. It's about me. I don't know how to be open. My work is my armor. I hide behind characters, behind the method. But that doesn't mean I don't see what you do, or don't value it." Silence fell between them. Outside, cars honked, and a distant siren wailed. In the studio, only the faint hum of the air conditioner could be heard. Stallone rubbed his chin, as if processing what he'd heard. Finally, he spoke. "You know, I probably went overboard too. I held a grudge over that '80s interview, that party, over everything. But maybe I was just looking for an enemy where there wasn't one." De Niro nodded. "We both messed up. But we're here, and we're not too old to fix it." He paused, then added with a faint smile, "Want a coffee?" "My treat." Stallone laughed, for the first time that night, genuinely. Coffee with Bobby De Niro? Sounds like the start of a new movie. Megan, still nearby, felt the tension in her shoulders ease. She quietly stepped away, not wanting to intrude. The two actors stood and slowly walked toward the exit, talking not as rivals, but as people who finally saw each other without prejudice. The next day, the Voice of the Nation episode went viral. Clips of De Niro and Stallone arguing, then reconciling, flooded X, news outlets, and morning shows. The audience, especially older viewers, was ecstatic. Marge, sitting in her Brooklyn living room, sipped tea and told Ellen over the phone. "I told you, Ellen, they're real. Not just stars, but people. And the way they talked at the end. I'm still tearing up." Fred, watching a rerun in a bar, raised his beer glass. "To De Niro and Stallone," he told the bartender. "They showed you can still be real in this day and age." The broadcast left behind more than ratings. In New York, where the lights never dim, two legends took a small step toward understanding. And though no one knew if they'd become friends or simply respect each other from afar, that moment became a symbol of hope. Hope that even the deepest wounds can heal through dialogue, through honesty, through a willingness to listen. Megan, returning home that night, wrote in her journal, "Today, I saw two giants become just people. And maybe that's the most important thing I've ever seen." The studio emptied. New York went on with its life. And somewhere in a small cafe, a few blocks from the studio, De Niro and Stallone sat at a table, drinking coffee and talking. About films, about life, about mistakes. And maybe about a future where they were no longer enemies.